AVP, Alien vs. Predator, was, for me, a really big deal. It was going to come out one day after my 11th birthday, and even though I had no experience with either Alien or Predator, after reading this book, I was all in. There was a surprising amount of material, with games and comics, and the books, which were my favorite. I fell in love with Michiko Noguchi, the human predator. Simply stunning. And the whole thing was so awesome. And then there are these two movies, and they're really, really bad. But crucially, they are not equal. In the ranking of Alien, Predator, and Aliens vs. Predator movies, everyone's list is going to look different. As far as I'm concerned, there are only two mistakes you can make. One, putting the Predator anywhere but the bottom. And two, ranking AVP, Alien vs. Predator, over AVPR, Aliens vs. Predator, Requiem. This is about how we define the word bad. Critics lambasted AVPR for its low production values and terrible acting and all that sort of critic stuff. But when it comes to the three letters in our needless acronym, AVPR gave me so much more of what I wanted than the admittedly more expensive and professional AVP. This is my question. Why is a movie with higher production value more worthwhile than a movie with higher entertainment value? I am not interested in which is the better film, but which one elicits in me the more compelling response. There is more entertainment value in Godzilla vs. Megalon than Godzilla 2014, though one is technically better. Why even have that conversation? I'm not a film producer. I don't give a shit that Gareth Edwards is a good director given a bad script, so let's give him a better one. I'm a moviegoer. And more than that, I'm a sci-fi fan. I have not always required the traditional pleasures of drama, let's say. Then again, 2004 was a long time ago. I'm not 11 anymore. It's been many years that I've sat down and watched AVP Alien vs. Predator and AVPR Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, and there's a reason for that, beyond the obvious. But when Prey was coming out, I watched all the Predator movies and reevaluated how I felt about especially Predator, which I appreciate more now. With AVP and AVPR, like how Prometheus impacted At the Mountains of Madness and Alien Covenant impacted Neil Blomkamp's Alien 5, AVP Alien vs. Predator was kind of a movie killer. As the reports go, James Cameron and Ridley Scott wanted to revisit Alien in the 2000s, but 20th Century Fox wanted to go in the crossover direction. Despite that James Cameron is the reason Stan Winston gave the Predator its iconic mandibles, he wanted no part in something as crass as Aliens vs. Predator. Instead, the studio booked Paul W.S. Anderson. Now, right away, I can sympathize with any filmmaker attempting to fill a gap left by the combined prestige of James Cameron and Ridley Scott, and back then I'm sure Anderson was a smart choice. He'd done sci-fi horror with Event Horizon, and surprisingly clever video game adaptations like Mortal Kombat and Resident Evil. What he had not done is Resident Evil Apocalypse, Resident Evil Extinction, Resident Evil Afterlife. AVP Alien vs. Predator is kind of a DMZ in his filmography, with modest genre hits on one side and trash on the other, Death Race notwithstanding. Anderson has a reputation, because whatever his skills as a filmmaker, he's often involved in beloved properties like Death Race 2000, Alien, Predator, Resident Evil, Monster Hunter, and there was even talk of a Spy Hunter and Castlevania. His approach wasn't the sort of reverent adaptation like we have these days, with filmmakers who grew up with the properties they're adapting. He liked to put his own spin on them. He turned the zombie horror of Resident Evil into a bizarre fan fiction where his wife Mila Jovovich is cooler than all the characters from the games. His Monster Hunter was an isekai manga, and despite not being a Monster Hunter player myself, I was so offended by that story premise I never bothered with the movie. For Alien vs. Predator, he didn't go the route of my beloved Michiko Noguchi and adapt the comics directly, only borrowing elements. Instead, he went to Eric von Daniken, the godfather of ancient astronaut theory. To summarize, AVP Alien vs. Predator is about how predators came to Earth a long time ago and taught humanity how to build pyramids for the express purpose of breeding xenomorphs for the hunt. That is super dumb. It's also the story of Prometheus, which sounds like irony, but that movie's also super dumb. Of course, it is directed by Ridley Scott, so the experience of going back and watching AVP after having seen Prometheus is night and day. You have the same scenes, but very different approaches. What we gain in actors like Lance Henriksen and Colin Salmon, we lose in the visual splendor and spatial enormity of Scott's direction. However, I don't know what kind of movie Ridley Scott was trying to make with Prometheus, but I do know what kind of movie Anderson was trying to make with AVP. Charles Weyland discovers one of the Predator pyramids underground in Antarctica and assembles a team of archaeologists and mercenaries to get there first. Now, the feeling I'm getting from this opening sequence is, with the tone and the music, it's one of those globe-trotting adventures, like we're going for something more respectable than horror. It's even reminiscent of Jurassic Park, especially how we're moving from place to place and introducing characters and exposition. But it's not Jurassic Park. It's someone who's seen Jurassic Park. It's a second-generation blockbuster, not Spielberg, but Emmerich. And if the infamous PG-13 rating wasn't indication enough, we're shooting for a general audience. Say what you will about recent fare like Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and Zack Snyder's Justice League, but those movies were made for fans. They're just a different kind of bad. Anderson knows that characters have arcs and they have character moments. The script is structured around these moments, but they don't actually happen, despite what the camera tells us. Here, Maxwell Stafford tells mercenary Adele and scientist Thomas to stay behind in the sacrificial chamber and catalog all the ancient stuff. The button on the scene is this look that Thomas gives Adele. Okay, I've seen that before in movies, and it feels correct, but what's being communicated here? These two are strangers. And the reason they're strangers is because you can't possibly imagine their relationship. It's one of those movies where the characters are at their most interesting when they're archetypes or stereotypes. This guy, Dr. Miller, has a big personality, but he's the scaredy cat. Maxwell is the hard-ass. Bishop is the rich guy. And there are so many avenues to take rich guy, but here we have the least interesting of all bishops. There's an animosity between Maxwell and our protagonist Lex, as they're both authority figures with overlapping responsibilities, but nothing comes of it. The pyramid begins to shift, and we start exploring the Verheiden character, where in one instance he ignores the screams of his colleague, and later he forms a reluctant bond with Miller, and then they're both killed without ceremony. It's a lot of setup, but no payoff. In fact, pretty much everybody dies before Act 2 is even over. I don't know if this movie is about an ensemble, or about one character with periphery players.
My dad broke his leg 700 feet from the summit of Mount Rainier. He was like you. He wouldn't go back or let us stop. On the way down, he developed a blood clot in his leg that traveled to his lung. He suffered for 4 hours before dying 20 minutes from the base.
I was hoping to come on here and sing the praises of Sanaa Lathan because this is pretty outside her wheelhouse, but she's given almost nothing to do. Her character Lex Woods is the guide for this expedition, handpicked by Weyland. After the presentation from Prometheus, she declines the offer, setting up an actual conflict between characters. Lex argues that Bishop's expedition is going to be dangerous, but we don't really know why. Of course, it's an expedition in Antarctica, but why doesn't it pass Lex's test? This is a character who is 100% derived from Ripley, but we have to remember that if handled improperly, Ripley can be kind of a scold. Remember how the other characters felt about her in Alien.
Look, I'm not going to do any more work. We get this straightened out.
Brett, you're guaranteed by law to get a share.
What?
Why don't you just fuck off?
What?
The trick is to ensure we don't feel that way, which is especially important with a black Ripley. We have to know where she's coming from and demonstrate why she's correct by showing and not telling. We learn that she was conflicted about the expedition because her father effectively killed himself climbing a mountain. Bishop is dying and wants to see her do something great before he goes. So this is the primary setup. In film school terms, Lex's dramatic need is to protect the people on this expedition, and it's personal. The question is, how will this need inform her actions later? How will she be put to the test? Let's look at some of her big moments, and I can think of 3: taking a stand against the Predator, picking a side, and killing an infected Sebastian. The first one happens after Maxwell's been immobilized by a Predator net. Despite the alleged animosity, she's quick to defend him here. Unfortunately, this action is repeated by 2 other characters who do not share her backstory. Throwing yourself into an unknown threat like this is a pretty intense idea that could have dramatic potential. Think of William Hurt's character toward the end of Dark City. His actions are not only cathartic, but speak to a newfound trust he has for the man he'd been investigating. Here, a less brave character like Verheiden would leave Maxwell to die. What if we're led to think that Lex might do the same because she's been so antagonized by Maxwell? Maybe it's even the most sensible idea to abandon him, inflating her decision to do the right thing. What if the experience with her father made her afraid rather than determined? Then we'd see her grow by taking action. Her biggest moment is the second one, making the choice to remain in the deadly pyramid and arm the surviving predator to prevent the xenomorphs from escaping to the surface.
Because if they do, everything everywhere could die.
In human terms, this is perfectly logical. In screenwriting terms, it's unmotivated. Saving the world is too abstract. It's why superheroes have girlfriends. Maybe they pass through a research station on the surface. Give me something concrete. Put a human face to what's at stake. Remember Newt? Mostly. More importantly, what does saving the planet have to do with her father? If anything, she's now occupying that role of the suicidal mountain climber, but Sebastian doesn't then occupy her previous role. There's no irony, no statement, no growth. And then she kills him. This is taken straight out of the comics, but Scott Conover was a more complicated character than Sebastian, and mercy killing is the end of an actual arc. In AVP, this is the only time Lex is brought to the point of emotion. Even the fight with the alien queen doesn't elicit much response. No Ripley scream or Naru war cry. Whatever. Unfortunate because the alien queen looks really good, and the film's climax has this amazing shot. But why are the predators even hunting in the cold of Antarctica? And why are the xenomorphs so animalistic? I suppose it's time to talk about the actual aliens and predators, as well as their eponymous verses. First and foremost, sound design. What is going on with this movie? This is what the Plasmacaster sounds like. And the predators do these lion roars? What happened to the Wicker Ring? And one of the key aspects of Predator is that they hunt in extreme heat. Remember the pit stains from Predator 2? At the end of Predator Concrete Jungle, it starts to rain, so they just go home. It's a hunt. It's more like vacation. And I think that's the best approach to the character. In the case of AVP, this is about initiation. These are young bloods on their rite of passage, so it can be explained. However, it can't be made interesting. Think about how the terms of the Predator are being applied. The Plasmacaster is being used in a defensive capacity. It isn't a hunt, it's survival. At that point, it's kind of a different character. Subtract kind of for the xenomorph, which are just monsters that attack, but this is hardly the fault of AVP. If anything, it's the fault of aliens for taking an unknowable creature of cosmic horror and turning it into a bug. Ever since, the horror of xenomorphs has had to come from their predatory adult form, with the whole terrifying life cycle becoming increasingly biological and familiar. The entire Aliens vs. Predator franchise takes that reduction to a terminal point of silliness, where I've seen Lin Kurosawa put the karate on hordes of xenomorphs. Actually, the comics' alien predator fighting isn't too far off, with the combat described as dance-like, one predator, multiple xenos. And despite being a subversion of the creature, it's still pretty cool. What do we get in AVP? A one-on-one. And then that xenomorph kills two predators. That is so wrong. So a few years later, AVPR, Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, has a chance to learn from all these mistakes. One of the revisions is right in the title. Yes, AVPR is meant to suggest the R rating, and fair enough, the bloodless kills of the original gave that film a sterile quality. Anderson artfully navigates the violence, like in Maxwell's death scene. Pretty smart, but not what I'm looking for. This is the man who previously killed Colin Salmon like this. By contrast, Requiem puts a brick on the accelerator straight into gross territory. You'll see heads explode, bodies cut in half, and a kid gets chest bursted. That's what I'm talking about. So, what else did AVPR learn from AVP? Well, for every step forward, we've taken a dozen steps back, which is fortunate then about the one step forward. Look at this movie. What is this? AVPR is pretty infamous for being too dark, and not just like how we say, oh, this horror movie's too dark. No, they made it too dark.
Hang on a second, I'm getting real dark pictures, Tom.
Shut up, Dave.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody ready?
Even in scenes of daylight, the blacks and the shadows create this strange unreality. And where do you even go from there? Split diopter? That's really awkward every single time. Or how about these cuts to black in the beginning, where we're just jumping from space to Earth to space to Earth, which just seems inefficient. When two characters are talking, the camera doesn't necessarily default to close-ups. It's almost 1950s, where an exchange of dialogue happens over one wide and the actors aren't always facing the camera. I think Anderson is a better student of film than the Strauss brothers. He may have his own quirks, like canted angles or oddly claustrophobic close-ups, but he's able to emulate existing styles. You can believe you're watching a movie by Roland Emmerich or Stephen Sommers. Meanwhile, AVPR is getting the basics wrong. This scene right here, there's so much further inefficiency. Why does it take 4 shots for this kid to meet the girl outside the school and then go inside? If you're not going to do close-ups, that means 1 shot. And if this is how the most basic scenes are filmed, how about that action? To be honest, I didn't have a hard time with the darkness this time, watching the uncut version on Amazon, which is the version that allegedly makes the movie make sense. But there's still a major problem with the action. When the Predator and the Predalien have their first fight, the Predalien sort of swings its arm and the Predator goes flying. It's not just unclear, but we're missing the impact. As Scott Adkins points out in this Polygon video, shooting fights in profile is best.
And yeah, profile is always going to be the best because you're going to fill the frame with action. You're going to see all the techniques landing.
Here we have action scenes shot with close-ups and dialogue shot with wides. AVPR Aliens vs. Predator Requiem takes place, I guess, directly following the original, when the Predalien bursts out, grows up, and wreaks enough havoc that the Predator ship crashes back on Earth in a small American town. A lone Predator is tasked with cleaning up this disaster, erasing all traces of Xenomorph. But not Predator, because a guy's gotta skin a body every now and again, you know what I mean? This is the most unique setting for an Alien or Predator movie because it isn't unique. It isn't a space prison or an alien game preserve. It's your backyard. Some people might find that boring or cheap, but it has potential. The comic Earth Angel took a similar approach, though that was set in the 1950s. Let's see that movie. I did recently watch Alien 3 and found that there was too much disconnect between the sociological implications of the setting, this religious prison, and what the characters in that setting were doing, surviving the Xenomorph. How is it that this never becomes a study of the human condition, of what people are willing to do, or how bureaucracy and hierarchies are sometimes the natural consequences of our worst impulses? It's just a bunch of guys running around. With The Stepford Wives, Get Out, A Nightmare on Elm Street, suburban horror is practically a subgenre unto itself, maybe to the point of error. Podcast host David Barr Kirtley says, "There's been half a century or more of reinforcing this message that the suburbs are sterile and conformist. Does anyone not know by now?" I've been thinking about the college admissions scandal and how easy it would be to repurpose A Nightmare on Elm Street, but with parents somehow paying for their kids not to be victimized by Freddy, at the cost of others. And I can't believe I just said that out loud, but I wasn't going to write that script. Think about the bureaucracy and hierarchies endemic to suburban America, from HOAs to the halls of high school. If xenomorphs and predators were running around killing people, you'd have to reconcile that conservative urge for the preservation of family and property. Do you screw over your neighbor to save yourself? Who becomes abstract in your social radius? Who becomes expendable? I think AVPR was the perfect opportunity for the classic breakdown of a community, even one that may have considered itself close-knit. Start with the monsters that do on Maple Street, and route through Big Little Lies, and then get back to me. Instead, it's just a bunch of guys running around, only this time not directed by David Fincher. We don't even have the stereotypes of AVP, we just have words like bully and soldier and ex-convict. Aside from bully, these words don't reflect on the characters in a meaningful way. The ostensible lead is Stephen Pascal's character, and if you can remember what his name is, I will give you $1 jillion.
Sir, that's not a number.
It's Dallas. So Dallas is the ex-convict, but if you didn't know that about him, you would never guess. Not that ex-convict is an indication of character, but he's just a guy. He might as well be an ex-truck driver or an ex-librarian. He doesn't really talk about it, and it doesn't inform any of his decisions or behaviors. Maybe he's trying to do good and redeem himself, but talk about telling and not showing. Not even telling. It appears that his dramatic need is help his younger brother Ricky. Help. Not very specific. And what does Ricky need help with? Well, the girl he likes, Jessie, is dating the bully, so the bullies beat him up. It seems like Dallas is going to go fight the bullies, but instead he helps Ricky find his keys in the sewer. That's how we get their first encounter with the xenomorphs. From there, Jessie breaks up with the bully, and her first date with Ricky is the next encounter with xenomorphs. Meanwhile, Dallas hangs out with the police sheriff, Eddie Morales, who's dealing with disappearances in the woods. I guess he gave up on Ricky. This is actually really frustrating, because I can't create a narrative here, even in the framework of media criticism. Like, none of this goes together. But 15 minutes in, the movie isn't done introducing characters. We also have Rico Aylesworth's character Kelly O'Brien, returning from a tour of duty on the same day Dallas is released from prison, on the same day aliens from outer space crash in the woods. She has a husband and a young daughter, who may be losing an ability to recognize her vanishing mother, though this is later explained as the girl simply being angry. I forgot to mention that Ricky is also a pizza delivery boy, and his boss is Rickety Cricket, giving us the film's only good performance.
I didn't help anybody. I was too scared. I just watched them die.
So we have all these characters who start out with their own worlds and conflicts, and you know they're destined to meet as spurred on by a new conflict. So what is that arc going to look like? Are they going to be fulfilled by the characters they interact with in the second half? Will their experiences answer the problems set up in the first half? Or will Kelly just happen to stumble into the sports store where everyone else just happened to be at that moment? Still, this crosscut between multiple sets of characters is a film comfort unafforded by the comparatively claustrophobic AVP. The locations in AVPR may be horror movie staples like the sewer from Alligator, the neighborhood from Halloween, even the industrial plant from Terminator. But I prefer this variety to the Pyramid. There's more to do in these spaces, where all the set pieces in AVP felt like they were happening in hallways, as if everyone's on their way to the events, which then never happen. AVPR also finally has a story payoff, or at least an event that comes second in a sequence and not just next. In literally his second encounter with the bullies, Ricky finally stands up for himself. Let's pause here and think about how we got to this point of growth. Did Dallas give him confidence or inspire him to believe in himself? No, this just happens. Maybe it's the adrenaline he got from making out with Jessie, who's one of those sexy high school girls. The pool party is interrupted by a xenomorph, which I can't tell if it's a callback or just a xenomorph swimming. I mean, that was bound to come up at some point. And this is good. Rivals are now thrown into a survival situation together. And then all the bullies get killed immediately. Ricky even tries to help one of them, like our more dramatic Lex Maxwell scenario, but this is completely unmotivated. Of course, the main bully survives, but don't think he's going to try to work together with Ricky and eventually form a bond. Kelly's husband gets killed, and this got a genuine chuckle out of me. Solid comedic timing. But this is another scenario where two characters at odds are suddenly forced together, Kelly and her daughter Molly. Look at this.
We have to keep running, baby.
There's a moment in the film where we check back on these two, and that's all that happens. She's running, and she talks about running. They end up taking cover in this cemetery, and Molly pulls out this bullshit.
Mommy, why did you leave Daddy?
This is similar but different. She's angry her mother left her, and now she's angry she left her dad. So we can say that Kelly's problem is leaving, at least in the eyes of her daughter. Surely, her arc is going to be like Dr. Alan Grant's in Jurassic Park.
He left us! He left us!
But that's not what I'm gonna do.
Unfortunately, like with AVP, whatever character was developing stops entirely when the monsters attack. So the next time we check in on Kelly and Molly, it's after they've escaped the alien-infested city.
Mommy? Are the monsters gone?
They're gone.
That's it. And Dallas and Ricky, well, Dallas asks for medical attention for Ricky, who gets it. Maybe I'm being a little unfair. Both Kelly and Dallas have their emotional climaxes earlier, and at the same time. Sheriff Eddie gets in touch with the army, who tells them to gather in the center of town for evacuation by air. Kelly questions this, justifying her army backstory perhaps more than her ease with the APC from Aliens. Here she makes a dramatic stand, no to center of town. Not everyone agrees with Kelly, however, including Sheriff Eddie. We have the final scene between Eddie and Dallas in the rain, and I can feel the ghost of drama here. But again, what is their relationship? Perhaps the prequel novel could explain it, but that was surprisingly never written. See, Eddie doesn't believe there's a helicopter on the hospital roof. I'm glad it got blown up by a nuclear bomb. And hey, I actually do feel something here, because these people are not entirely abstract. It's kind of horrific. Before the three survivors make it to the very real helicopter, Dallas decides to go around and shoot xenomorphs. Maybe he had to fill a tactical opportunity. Kelly tells him, "You don't have to do this, Dallas," with very little conviction. True enough, he doesn't have to do it. Is he redeeming himself for his sins? Is he finally stepping up and being heroic? I mean, he already did that. Is he helping his brother? Like, I'm going crazy here.
Get to the chopper!
You know how video essays and YouTube videos sometimes are like guy yelling? When I'm watching this movie, I don't give a shit about any of this. I have a cell phone. It's when I start thinking about it. This is self-inflicted. And perhaps then the irony is complete. See, the reason I never went back and revisited AVP in particular is because when I was that 11-year-old kid, so excited, I pushed this movie on all of my friends.
We've had that conversation 5 times a day for the last month because we keep watching Predator and all you talk about is Weathers and Jesse the Body Ventura and how many pounds they can pack
It's important to pack en masse.
And they knew, like I did but couldn't admit, that it was bad. I feel terrible about that. So here I am, 2 decades later, still thinking about these 2 movies. So, who wins in the battle between AVP and AVPR? Well, I think we all know the answer to that question. Both of these movies were even worse than I remembered. The Predator has some new toys, like the Shuriken, which gives us the best kill of either movie. I didn't realize Jessie gets cut in half. I thought she was just pinned to the wall. I'm not sure about dual plasma casters, though, and I liked the extended wrist blades at first, but they look too flimsy. If they put some of this stuff in hunting grounds, maybe I'd pick them up. But as far as the ranking goes, I really don't care anymore. If you think AVP is better than AVPR, that's fine. I'm not going to call you a and it isn't because I've learned so much more about storytelling in movies in the past 20 years, it's because Prey came out. I don't have to quibble about degrees of good inside bad movies because I have an actually good movie now. And oh my god, man, Prey is so fucking good. Look at how clear this is. This one scene, mere minutes of film, is the best thing I've seen this year. It brings tears to my eyes. It's so good. And Prey has something else that the 2 AVP movies specifically lack, and it's a very simple trick. So listen, the humans and the aliens are connected. I mean, that solves every problem in both screenplays. The emotional climax for the human character should be the climax of the film when the alien is defeated. Defeating the alien should answer the dramatic need. The characters can't just be incidental, because then you fall back on what you think the characters are supposed to be doing, and maybe you cobble together a facsimile of movies we've seen, maybe. In a career retrospective interview with Grantland in 2014, Paul W.S. Anderson had this to say on the subject of AVPR. That movie showed what a good job we'd done with the first movie. It's like, okay, you can pick apart my AVP, but take a look at that one and then maybe watch my movie again and you'll have a new appreciation for it. AVP is the product of competent, even smart filmmaking, and a severely misguided approach. Instead of meeting the material on its terms, Anderson came in at angles, running Alien and Predator through a mental filter which resulted in ancient astronauts and the underground pyramid to ensure continuity. These were his concerns, rather than the engines of either series, either creature. We don't have the French fur trader scene. We do a little better in that regard with AVPR, but the xenomorphs are just the next monster in a small town. Studio ADI really brings the creatures to life, but if the aliens aren't being aliens, and the predators aren't being predators, they are just guys in foam latex. The illusion is gone. More importantly, nothing cool happens. And I could let that go, sure, but how does nothing cool happen twice?